Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to today's conversation. I'm Sarah Jane, and I am delighted my usual co-host, Enolia, is with us, and
Hi.
our guest is Dr. Birgitte Tan. Birgitte, thank you for joining the pair of us this evening. Well, it's evening for us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah and Enolia. It's such an honor and a delight to be able to be with you today.
Thank you. Now, our topic for this program is grief and loss. And I'm sort of pretty certain that everybody in some way, shape or form has been affected by grief and loss. But I'd really like to start with, what is it? Because I think a lot of us think about grief and loss as being about losing a parent or a sibling or grandparents, losing a member of the family. And maybe some even consider about losing pets. And I get that one. I really do, because I think we've all been through that. But I really do feel that grief and loss is so much more than losing a parent, a sibling, a grandparent, them dying. All right, let's just use that word, shall we? Them dying. It is so much more than that. It can be the loss of a job. It can be the loss of a friend, a friendship. It can be so much. It can be feeling abandoned. So yes, I know I could just expand it, but I'm going to let you two expand on it because I'm sure you've got your own thoughts. So let's come to you first, Birgitte. Share a little about what you think grief and loss is.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so much. Yes, a lot of people think it's actually almost like a myth in the society that grief is only from the what I call the 3D: death, divorce, or dire diagnosis. But truly, grief, and I am a certified grief recovery specialist, and for us, and something you might want to consider, grief is the unsettling feelings caused by a change, any change in your familiar routine. And so any change that can cause you to have an unsettling feelings, whether you typically in the past be able to travel anywhere you want in the world. We were talking about this just now, Sarah. And now you want to get on the plane, you're going to get fined if it is not for some particular important reason, or you want to be able to go to the beach and breathe the fresh air, or the garden or the park, and now you have to have a mask. And yes, it's important to have a mask, but at the same time you feel that something constricting you, if that's what you feel, and that can cause grief. Actually, here in the US, we just changed time last week, and I believe in the UK you guys going to change time this coming weekend. And even so, many people, when you fall backward, when you change time and you lose that 1 hour, many people, it's a change in your familiar routine. For the last 6 months you've been doing this, and you wake up this time, and then now you lose an hour, and that alone depend on particularly what's going on in your life, how early you have to wake up, can cause you to feel unsettling feelings, which is grief, and wonder why many people feel irritable and grumpy, and then you suddenly half of the office turned into Grinch, right? and, and that's because grief manifests themselves in grief. A lot of time grief doesn't particularly manifest as sadness. Sometimes when it is a matter of a noticeable loss, but things like that, a lot of time grief manifests itself as irritability, as anger, as headaches, and so forth.
Yeah, thank you. And Enolia.
So I am listening to your definition of grief, of which I agree. And I'm sitting here thinking the only constant in life is change. And so really what we are on, and the realization's hitting me as you're explaining what grief is that we're on this constant roller coaster, and our goal is to stay balanced because change is constant. So therefore, too much change causes grief. Too little change causes grief. So really, wow, life is nothing but a cycle, and a cycle of change, of where we're just trying to keep grief as a constant in balance, And so those moments of irritability when you have to go, I have to consciously make an effort to be happy because I feel way off, And when change is overwhelming and it's just like, okay, I can handle this. I need to pull it back. I'll put it in my perspective. I'll be okay. And then again, come back into balance so that you're not grieving the fact that the change is so tremendous and you don't necessarily feel, in control. So that's a fallacy anyway. But we're never in control. But as we move through the story of what life is dealing us and what life is showing us and what life is. So, wow, yes, grief is something that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis all the time, pulling it in balance, and there's no getting away from it. So, yeah, how do you deal with grief? Yeah.
And I think with grief, I think you've got to think about sort of children. Because, okay, when I sort of think about my own story and that being hospitalized after the accident, that was nobody's fault. It was circumstances, but it was a massive change for a child. But it can even be down to how you are spoken to. It really can, because yes, I love your definition, but I think to me, there's even aspects that go deeper than that. Because if you are constantly hearing you're stupid, you're an idiot, something that makes you think you're worthless, that you don't have a right to have a voice, that is also a form of grief. Because you're losing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's happened, I think it's bad enough when it happens to an adult. But when it happens to a child who has no understanding of life, that can be actually very traumatic, which is taking it almost a stage further than grief and loss. But we're going to come into that in another program. But so the grief is very important, that people acknowledge how things make them feel. It's that acknowledgement of it. Okay, this thing has happened. Yes, at the time of recording this, we are still in various countries around the world in lockdowns from all the coronavirus, etc., etc. Sort of hopefully we're starting to come out of it, but who knows? We have no idea what tomorrow will bring for any of us. And so it's really just being aware, okay, what is going on? Because it has caused a lot of anger. That's because people feel their freedom has been taken away. Something you lose can create grief. Period. Whatever it is. I've said enough. So Enolia, should we come to you next?
So, I'm sitting here thinking about that. There's so much in life that can impact us with grief, and trauma results in grief, and we deal with traumas, whether they're grand or small, all the time. And so whether it's perceived or whether it's real, the emotional and the processing of that emotion of grief and a processing of the emotion of trauma is a real reality. And I guess I would ask you, Dr. Birgitte, or Birgitte, how do you suggest that people deal with processing these emotions, you know, of when something traumatic has happened, when grief is encountered, and you can't get away from them?
There are a few ways that I personally recommend to suggest on how to navigate this when something happened and it's impacting you. And there are actually multiple different ways. One is definitely perceptions, like you said, Enolia, because it's how you see them. You know, the Chinese character for crisis, the Mandarin character for crisis, composed of two characters. And the first character means danger. The second part of that crisis, the second character means opportunity. So how do you see a crisis? Do you see it as a danger, or do you see it as an opportunity, or do you see it as both? If some of us, I personally, I'm typically a positive person, but not Pollyanna. I said I will see the danger, and I also see the opportunity. Not wearing a blindfold here, but so so that's how it is. So that's the first is perceptions, and like Sara says, it's acknowledging the feeling. Many times nowadays in this world, with the personal development, everybody said you gotta be strong, you gotta be strong. But many people take it as I gotta be strong, and then I push away and pretend. And no, let's not do a spiritual bypass here. You want to honor it, and actually, for that reason, there's so many things out there. For that reasons, I actually compile them. I compile or I simplify and streamline all the different tools and skills for being able to navigate and gracefully and successfully through change and grief into my book, Seeking Peace, the proven 5 fingers method to thrive through change effortlessly, because it's a lot of different things and there is a lot of misinformations, not because anybody has malintentions or anything, just because a lot of time, like we just mentioned, people say you gotta be strong, and then it's taken in a wrong way and actually cause more suffering.
But isn't strength about actually having the strength to honor yourself? It's not strong to bottle it up, because boy, will it come back and bite you if you do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We absolutely really have to say, okay, how's this making me feel? Okay, and if you can't deal with it right in that moment, honor yourself. I will come back to you in an hour, in 2 hours, this evening, whatever it is, and honor yourself enough to do that. How did that make me feel? Why did it make me feel that way? Is there something I can learn that is a nudge from something that has happened in my past? Is it actually that feeling? Is that my inner child coming out and saying, please, 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 I'm here? And this is touching something raw in me that is not dealt with. And the strength comes in honoring yourself, not in burying it. And don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking people. I'm really not. I wouldn't do that. But when we bury something because we don't know how to deal with it, we're not helping ourselves. We're hurting ourselves way, way more. We're actually going to cause more grief by not dealing with it. And if the people around us cannot accept that, then I'm not being funny. Have we got the right people around us? It is about us listening to ourselves first and foremost. So Birgitte, let's come back to you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. A lot of people misunderstand being vulnerable as being fragile. And being vulnerable does not mean being fragile. It actually takes a lot of strength to be vulnerable, to allow yourself the time and space to acknowledge your feelings, whatever the feeling is, and also to cry. A lot of people say, oh, I'm not going to cry. My background is in oncology. Being an oncologist, I will have people apologizing for crying when they hear the statistical outcome of what they're going through. And it's like, well, it's absolutely normal for you to cry. It's actually healthy. Many studies nowadays shows that your tears will help you be able to tolerate pain and to recover better. I mean, even our body, we have three different kind of tears. We have three different types of tears, and the emotional tears carry a completely different set of substances than the reflex tears or the basal tears. And that's for reasons, because your body know that there are times you need to cry. So how about if you just allow your body to help you and allow that tears to roll? And now, and the reasons we feel vulnerable, there are society where expressing feelings and crying is not considered as weakness and actually being celebrated. And in those society, back to perception, in those society, if something happened and you cry, they said, oh, good for you that you are acknowledging things. But a lot of the modern day society, we are told, oh, if you cry, go to your room. Well, what's the message giving to us there? And so it's our perceptions on what's going on as well. And yes, absolutely, I so agree with you that being vulnerable is actually allowing yourself. Let me replace that. Allowing yourself to feel vulnerable is actually take a lot of strength, when it means that you're staying true to yourself and your heart, regardless of what other people want to say. And well, again, that just like you said, Sarah, those who matters usually don't mind you, and those who mind you gotta think twice about that.
Yes.
Enolia.
And I just want to ask, and I want to add, okay? So here we are, we're being vulnerable, and we are taking ourselves through the process of grieving. And we are taking ourselves through the process of dealing with the trauma by looking at it, releasing it. But I want to emphasize releasing it. And I have found from my own personal experience that a release has to come. Because if I choose to stay stuck, and I'm going to just say stuck in the story of whatever I'm grieving about, stuck in the story of whatever I'm having trauma about, then it taints my eyes and it taints the way that I look at life for the rest of my life, if that's how long I choose to hold on to the story. So if I don't have this moment where I release it, and maybe we go to the word forgiveness, and not necessarily I have to forgive, somebody and take the burden of what they did and take the brunt of it. No. That's not what I'm talking about. But forgiveness for self, forgiving yourself in the situation, forgiving yourself in the mixing of with whatever happened with the other person, so that when I forgive myself, I can lift the veil of the trauma. I can lift the veil of the grief. And then I can see through, and I'm going to use eyes of freedom of the trauma and freedom of the grief. And so many people get stuck here. And I guess that's what I want to ask about. How long is it reasonable to be formidable, tied in the emotion, And I know it's not prescriptive. I understand that it's not prescriptive, but the emphasis of moving through and moving past the story, and moving through and moving past the story doesn't mean that you don't acknowledge it, that it's not important, that you don't honor it, and that you don't have a love or affinity for whatever took place, if that's where your love and affinity need to be. But that you have to move past the story in order to lift the veil of the story and be able to see life through clear eyes, through clarity, through love, without feeling pain in everything that you see and trauma in everything that you do. So what are your thoughts, Birgitte?
How long before once where you said, if I understand your questions correctly, how long before you move on?
Mm-hmm.
I would say, I tend to say that if you look at everyone's fingerprint, we all have different combinations of fingerprints just because we are all meant to be unique. Yes. And so for me, everybody has their own time. There is no one time. I would say the time when you notice that it's causing you additional pain of whatever it is definitely time to, I would recommend that you consider moving on. Now, for some of us, we don't need to wait until that time. And for some of us, somebody really close to us passed away and we move on 3 days later. And then there is the other part of grief. And so that's also many times, depending on what's going on, it's actually preceded the event. So that's also to be taken into considerations. I work with sometimes with people who takes care of people who are ill, elderly, and so forth. So we have what we call the anticipatory grief. And they've been grieving all along. And for some people, they might say, oh my goodness, your, let's say, spouse just passed away 3 weeks ago and you out celebrating. And for some people, that would consider you're rushing it out. You're moving too fast. But if you've been in this for 3 years or 13 years, you said, I have been completing this and I have been ready and I have honored that and I honored the final curtain close and I'm ready to move on. And so there is really, everybody has different time. I would say the time you notice where it's actually hold you back or drag you down is definitely a good time to say, okay, is there something else that I choose to do to be able to move on further? But otherwise, everybody is completely different.
Okay.
And I think with our family, and I'm especially thinking about when my mum's dad died. And we had the funeral. And then we went back to the house. And because it was literally just before Christmas. He died the 13th of December that year. And so we managed to get the funeral in before Christmas. So we were very lucky in that, but not made easy because his birthday was Boxing Day. So it was going to be a pretty hard Christmas for us all because he also lived in the same house as us. So I was like 19 at the time this happened. But we came back and we were sat in, it was an old Victorian house. There was a log fire in this room that was open onto the hall. It was what we used as a dining room for guests. But at that time of the year, we didn't have any guests. So we were all sat in this room and we were sharing stories about my grandfather. And we were having a good laugh, and not at him, but at the amazing person that he was. We were able to share some fun and some joyous memories. The hard part for me was that the work that I was doing, and I had a very unsympathetic manager at the time, very unsympathetic, I had to go back to work that afternoon. So the funeral had been in the morning and I had to go back to work. But being able to stay in the beauty of the stories we were sharing. But I saw him on a daily basis, every day, because he lived in the same house. But it was being able to share those beautiful stories with humor that he would have appreciated. So we can go into the tears and the grief in the hard grief, or we can go into a more joyous grief. And don't know whether that's quite the word, because these are words coming out of my head now. I haven't thought about this, but there's a part of me that thinks this is how we were with the deaths of my grandparents. We spent time talking about them in beautiful, positive ways and sharing things that happened with them, but good things, not bad, not sad things, rather than bad things. And so I think we all find what works for us. Just to add, when my father died, my mother decided, I have a fabulous pair of patchwork trousers, multicolored. And my mother decided, because my dad loved apparently seeing me in these, and I wore them to the funeral at my mother's request. And I had to stand on the altar and do a reading in a Catholic church wearing these trousers. But my godmother, who is a nun, she loved it. So are we choosing to honor the people and ourselves, or are we going with what people say? You've got to wear black or navy blue. You've got to mourn. Why don't we start celebrating life? And when there's a big change in our life, see it as a door closing and a door opening. So, right, I've said more than enough. I've said more than enough. So, come on, let's come back to you, Enolia.
I'm sitting here thinking about what you said, and I really think it really depends on how people handle death. I really do. And how it's handled in your belief system and how it's handled within your family. My family honored those who passed on, that this is a natural state of mind. And yes, it hurts, but please, work with it, deal with it, and understand I'm in a better place. And I don't want you to grieve. I want you to celebrate my life. I think about when I pass, and one day we all do. It's number one, it's a natural state to pass. Number two, I want to be celebrated. I don't want you to remember me, how do I want to be remembered? I want you to celebrate and think about all of the beautiful things that I left as a legacy. The little things that I might have done, the way I made you laugh, these particular things. I think about our whole concept of a funeral, and funeral is to accommodate grief, correct? It's closure for the people, not for the person who actually passed away. It's closure for the people who knew the person, right? So if I get to dictate that you're going to have this ceremony about me, I want you to laugh. I want you to celebrate. I want you to have joy. I want you to play my favorite songs, dance, because these are the things that I love to do in activity. But somewhere along the line, we have this system that basically says to grieve is to be low and to be down. And if you're laughing or smiling or celebrating in any way, well, shame on you, you're not honoring the person. And I even wonder where these concepts come from. Yeah. So I'll just leave it at those are my thoughts about it. And what about you, Birgitte?
I find that very interesting. Yes, absolutely. A lot of time. And it is actually, even so, it's different culture and different custom. If we look around the world, there are still culture where, you know, it's the person has moved on, has left the physical body, and so time to celebrate. And thankfully nowadays there are more and more people who choose when their loved one passed to choose what it is that, based on how the persons were not listening to everybody has to go and wear black. When my closest friend, my best friend, passed away a year and a half ago, very close to Christmas, the her family says, well, this is how she usually is, and they decide to stand up for her and themselves actually, and say, she's never a fan of black, she just done. And so either wear something flowery or purple or red, because that's the color that she choose. And they play some, let's just say, atypical songs at the celebrations of life. They didn't have a funeral, they have a celebration of life. It's, you might say, it's a very atypical song to play at such moment, but hey, that's their favorite song. And so it's different culture. There are indigenous cultures in this world where they say, okay, somebody passed, and so we do a 30-day celebrations of their life and our life. And so everybody is different, truly. And it's sometimes on, are we letting society dictates on what it is that we are doing? And for some people, it is a good thing to be able to, I suspect part of the reasons we do a lot of the funeral and so forth the way it is now is because, as you said, Enolia, to accommodate people. It's almost giving them the space and time to grieve and to cry. It's okay to cry, which is a good thing, because if it is celebration, for some people it turns into, I'm going to put on a laughing and fun face and pushed away the grief, which the grief should be there, and we want to be to be allowed to cry as well as to laugh. And sometimes it's a mixture of both. Which my friend's celebration of life was a beautiful thing, that we laugh and we cry and we laugh more and we cry more and then we laugh more. And for some people, we laugh, we cry, we drink, and repeat. And so it was a beautiful thing. It was like, let's just be true. For some, yes, it is. If it is a custom to, your custom to be wearing all black or whatever, and that's what you feel called in respect to the person who's passing and the family who's going through, by all means. And for some, it is the other way around. And so, but I suspect, in a way, to me, in a society where many people shy away and don't have the opportunity and the time to grieve, it is a good thing to be able to have the time and space where you actually, it's perfectly normal for you if you're gonna cry right now. So at least they have that space to cry and be sad and acknowledge that part of their feeling. And then beyond that, it is what feel best for you is what serve you best. And at the same time, we also know that each and every one of us is love and made of love. And
Yes.
for when we are living this physical body, love is energy, and energy cannot be ended. So the love that's there is still here. For some of us say, how could we celebrate after such a loss? What's true to the essence of everyone is love. And the love of the person whose the physical body is not moving anymore is still here with you, and it will never end. And you can choose to celebrate that love.
Absolutely. I'm thinking back to sort of mum, because we lost dad sort of 9.5 years ago. So it's been a while. But okay, I'm saying mum, but it's for a lot of people who it's their partner in life. They've lived together for many, many years. Children, if they've had them, have left. They've flown the nest, and they don't get to see them on a daily basis. And suddenly this person who they've lived with for 40, 50, 60 years, their companion in life is gone. And they wake up to an empty home. They go out to do the food shopping and they come back to an empty home. One of the things that my mum was suggested to my mum was that she leave the radio on when she went out, so that when she came home, there was sound in the flat. There may be voices or music, but she knew it was, although it was the radio, she wasn't coming back to a complete silence. And so I think, as much as it is a celebration of people's lives, you have still got those people who they were a constant companion. And then suddenly that is gone. Yes, absolutely. And there will be times of tears. And some of those people think about, oh, should I cry? Yes, you should. Allow yourself that time to cry. But I would also say support yourself with allowing some happy memories as well. Grief, some people can take grief too far. Are the tears poor me, or they are release and let go? And I'm not judging anyone here. I think if people are listening to this and they're thinking, oh, have I gone into poor me now? Or is this still grief? Am I still doing some letting go? There is a very, as you said, 3 different types of tears. There is a very different feel to that I'm looking for attention to actually this genuinely still does hurt. And so grief and loss affect us all very differently. And it depends on what it's attached to in respect of what has happened. So Birgitte, now I've chucked that bit into the mix. Over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's everything is different, and again, like I think you put it very well. What it's attached to, instead of what's happened, circumstance is circumstance by itself. It is neutral. One example, whether it is a passing of somebody, and of course, if it is your long-term companion, and now you are coming back to an empty home after 40 years, that could be something that's very impactful. And at the same time, it could also be a career that you have for 40, 50 years, and now you retire. And then you wake up in the morning and say, what am I gonna do now? And what you made out of that is what's going to decide how you feel day by day and in the future. And again, when it's not to say, oh, okay, I'm gonna turn on the radio and pretend that this didn't happen. That's not the case. And we want to honor. It's very important to honor. I start seeking peace with acknowledging and honoring what you're going through, and then after that, it's absolutely for each and every one of us to choose what we're going to have the outcome out of anything. I know a lady, Dorothy. Her husband passed. Her husband of 60 years. A little over 60 years. Dorothy was 87 when her husband passed, when Jack passed away. And yes, for the first 6 months, she wished she could die. and si wish si kutai. And then one day, Dorothy says, you know, if I'm still here, I decided and I'm choosing that I'm going to do something. I'm not going to just sit there. And the 6 months could be 6 months, could be 6 days, could be 6 weeks. But she decided, like you said, Sarah, what are you gonna do with it? And she decided, well, I now I have more time. I'm retired. I live very comfortably. How about if I pursue my passions that she pushed away when she was young to be able to work, to raise kids and so on, and then to take care of the husband. And with Dorothy, she chose to, for some reason, she always has fascination with China painting. So she chose to go back and say, I'm just going to take a class at the community college about China painting, see if I even truly like it or it's just a fantasy. Turned out she was such a great China painter. In a matter of less than a year, her work was in local gallery and bringing so much joy, and all her proceeds from the China painting, she ended up building a foundation. And all the proceeds from the China paintings goes to the foundations for for spouse of fallen soldiers. Right? Just a wonderful work. And so what it is that you choose to make out of your circumstance, whether it is a loss of a spouse after 60 years. And again, we don't want to be Pollyanna. We don't want to put a blindfold. We're not doing spiritual bypass, but at some point we choose on what it is that we want to do, and allow support as much as you can. Because with Dorothy, we work with her at the beginning. She said, okay, first we supported her so she doesn't take herself out, and then after that we supported her and said, okay, this is what you want, and so this is what you call, and allow support so you can become you moment to moment.
I'm sitting here thinking about this too, because I think based on what my family had always done, that opening up your eyes to see the world is imperative. To see the world, because grief really prevents you from seeing anything except what's in front of you. And like you said, we're not being Pollyanna here, but as you understand that you've grieved, and a lot of people go, well, what can I do? And there is a world in front of you. And, you can start by creating a garden that represents the person that may have passed, or the trauma that you may have gone through. Or, I've met so many people who have had longstanding partners and walks in the garden. Walks in the garden, going to the local garden where you can just walk in a walking path, the Zen garden, something created to make a walk, to see the beauty in life, to see the beauty in this world. Somewhere along the lines of all of this, we lose the beauty in the fresh air and the tremendous gifts that are all around us that can be seen in all of the simple little things, as much as just standing there and watching the breeze blow through the leaves of a tree, and that the tree is standing in its stature with the sunlight. And, if it's morning dew shimmering, I think of things like that, because a sunrise, a sunset, going out and taking a look at the world through new eyes, through different eyes, seeing the beauty of the world in the person that had passed, and bringing that through yourself. Because if you don't bring beauty and joy and laughter and bits of these pieces in to replace that grief, then somewhere along the lines you get lost. Somewhere there. Yeah. So to me, it's an imperative piece. It's very, very important.
I think, is there anything either of you would like to share at this point? Because I think we've covered an awful lot from our own perspectives. And I think, we agree on an awful lot, and it's great that we come at it differently. And
Ways, yeah.
we've all had experiences of loss, job loss, accidents and lots of parents. In fact, I've lost a sibling, so, and grandparents, because at the ages we are, it would be very unusual not to have experienced some sort of loss. And that goes for pets in our family, and I'm sure it does in a lot of families. And some children, that's their first awareness of loss. And that can be really traumatic, losing a pet. It really can cause a lot of grief in children, whatever that pet may be. So I suppose for all of us, it is what feels right for me. Let me allow my time, whatever that might be. Don't let me be dictated to by others. Let me just honor the love that I have, not had, have, for whatever that situation, circumstances, person, pet is, and honor it. And then, as you rightly said, what can we do to support ourselves to move on? Because especially with the death of a loved one, they would not want us to cease our life because they've left. They really wouldn't. They are, and for me, I believe they are watching over us, and they will support us with our choices. But hopefully our choice will be to do something with our lives, not just sit and mope. And I am not belittling the hurt of loss. I'm really not. But we can get to that point of being a mope. And I'd like to encourage people not to get to that point. So, and then, Birgitte, anything more that you would like to share?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. So I would say two very quick things. The first is to acknowledge truly a lot of people undermine the impact and the significance of change. That's why since the pandemic starts, we see increase, and you mentioned significant increase in people, but also children and adolescents taking out their own lives. And for kids, they might not have lost a pet, they might not have lost a loved one, a family member, but even just a change in their routine, not being able to see your friends is a loss. And knowing that for you and the children in your life, whether they are your own children or somebody else's, that it's very important. We see such an increase, and it's heartbreaking and that's because people not realizing that even something seemingly for some people simple can be highly impactful. And then know that you are not alone. You have support. We are here for you. I am here for you. There are many resources on my website that you can look at and say, okay, if I know there's a specific article that if somebody you think might be grieving, what can you do? And if you are going through things, what can you do? If you went through things, but now you're ready for success and moving on, what can you do? And of course, I'm here. I'm available to connect with you, to provide you support, complimentary laser coaching, anything in that aspect. There's a lot going on in life right now, and you are not alone. Feel free to reach out to us because we're here for you to support you.
Thank you. And we will share the Birgitte's website under the video. So if you're watching, and it is on the website at the moment. So do under sort of today's conversation pages, do go and check that out. It's all there.
Yeah, and I'll if you like to, I'll provide even the link that if you want to just come to my mind, I actually could even provide the link where you can just click and jump on my calendar, and we'll have a conversations on how we can support you, because there's a lot been going on. Thank you, Sara.
Yeah.
And I think that I want to end this by saying you are not alone. And if you find yourself alone, reach out. You do not have to be alone. Again, there are resources here. Reach out to us, reach out to someone you love, but reach out. It is imperative. Take a walk. Go in the sunlight, a breath of fresh air. And understand that you are a gift, and you are needed, and you are so loved. And I think that I'm going to end it there. Dr. Birgitte, I'm so thrilled to have had you here on the show. Sara and we want to thank you. We're excited for you to have a conversation. And I just want to make sure if there's anything else, give you opportunity, anything else you want to say before we end?
It's a great honor and a great delight to be able to serve you. And I am here for you, one click away on my calendar, one click away on my website. I'm here for you. I'm available on multiple medias, Facebook, LinkedIn, and so forth. You are not alone. We're here for you.
Excellent, excellent. And that's today's conversation. And our next show will be April 9th. On today's conversation, we're going to have guest Ben Karen, and he will talk about Another World Awaits, inviting hope, compassion, and possibility in times of conflict and change. And that's going to be, again, April 9th, and that's a Friday, 9 a.m. PST, 11 a.m. CST, 12 p.m. EST, and 5 p.m. GMT. So
BST by then.
BST by then, okay. So please come out, join us on today's conversation. Thank you, and have a beautiful, beautiful, blessed day.
Thank you, folks. Take care. Be safe. Stay well. Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you.